On April 20th, 1999, two Columbine High School students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, carried out an armed attack at their school. The massacre lasted 49 minutes, leaving 13 people dead and 24 injured. The attackers died by suicide inside the library after their original plan to detonate propane bombs in the cafeteria to cause hundreds of deaths failed. The Columbine shooting was not the first school attack in the United States, but it became the most high-profile of its era. Live television coverage, the widespread distribution of images, and the subsequent leak of the attackers' journals and videos created a cultural phenomenon that endures to this day. The case sparked national debates on gun control, bullying, mental health, and school safety. It also inspired a wave of copycats. Eric Harris was born on April 9, 1981 in Kansas. His father was a cargo pilot for the Air Force, so the family moved on several occasions. In July 1993, they settled permanently in Colorado. Eric struggled to form lasting bonds, becoming withdrawn and deeply devoted to video games. Dylan Klebold was born on September 11, 1981, in Colorado. His father was a geophysicist, and his mother worked with people with disabilities. Dylan had been part of a program for gifted children, but after changing schools, his shyness made it difficult for him to adjust. Eric and Dylan met in 1993 when they were both in elementary school. They shared common interests: video games, industrial music, and films with violent and critical content. Both felt marginalized within the school environment, although records indicate they were not victims of systematic bullying, but rather that their isolation was largely self-imposed. In 1995, both enrolled at Columbine High School. Over the following years, they began exhibiting troubling behavior. In January 1998, they were arrested for stealing a van. As part of a diversion program, they attended anger management classes and wrote a letter of apology to the vehicle's owner. They were discharged from the program early after being deemed rehabilitated. Between 1998 and 1999, Eric maintained a website where he posted hate lists, bomb-making instructions, and specific threats against classmates, including Brooks Brown. Brooks Brown's parents read the threats and contacted the police in March 1999. Officers did not execute a search warrant they had requested. Had they done so, they would have found the arsenal and the school blueprints the teenagers had prepared. In March 1999, Dylan wrote a story for his creative writing class in which a teenager matching his description carried out a massacre. The teacher alerted the school counselor and summoned Dylan's parents, but they downplayed the writing. Eric and Dylan dubbed their plan Judgment Day, NBK, after the movie Natural Born Killers. The date chosen was April 20th, 1999, to coincide with the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing April 19th and Adolf Hitler's birthday, April 20th, although investigators have noted that the timing with Hitler's birthday may have been circumstantial. They acquired weapons legally. An adult classmate bought them a shotgun and a carbine at a gun show. Other firearms were purchased through an acquaintance in the parking lot of their workplace. They also manufactured over 100 homemade explosives, including propane bombs weighing 22 pounds each, which they planned to place in the cafeteria to cause a massive collapse. In the months leading up to the attack, Eric and Dylan left behind multiple warning signs that went unheeded. Eric's website, which contained explicit threats and plans. Dylan's essay, a short story depicting a school massacre. Eric's erratic behavior, such as attempting to buy a handgun from a classmate. Classroom comments, including Eric telling a teacher that he had built a working bomb. On March 31st, 1999, Brooks Brown's parents contacted the police for the last time. They received no response, and the investigation was shelved. On April 20th, 1999, Eric and Dylan arrived at the school around 11 a.m. They placed 2 propane bombs in the cafeteria and returned to their vehicles to await the explosion. At 11:19 a.m., after the bombs failed to detonate, they decided to execute Plan B, entering the school armed. Between 11:19 a.m. and 11:24 a.m., they opened fire on students outside and in the hallways, killing several. At 11:24 a.m., they entered the library, where 56 people were hiding under tables. Between 11:24 a.m. and 11:36 a.m., over a 7-minute span, they shot at students. They asked some whether they believed in God before shooting them. They killed 10 people and injured 12, while also firing outside and throwing explosives. At 11:36 a.m., they left the library and continued walking through the school. At 12:08 p.m., Eric and Dylan returned to the library and took their own lives. Eric shot himself in the roof of his mouth. Dillon shot himself in the temple. SWAT teams entered the school after the attackers were already dead. Computer science teacher Dave Sanders, who had helped evacuate students, bled to death in a classroom due to delays in rescue efforts. In the days that followed, police searched Eric and Dillon's rooms and found journals, videos, and documents detailing their plans. They recorded a series of videos known as the basement tapes, in which they discussed their motivations. In these tapes, they explained that they were not seeking revenge on jocks or bullies, but rather aimed to cause as many deaths as possible. They also expressed their contempt for society and their desire to be remembered. The tapes were transcribed and largely destroyed by court order, out of fear that they would inspire other attackers. Full transcripts are expected to be released in 2026.
You just had to see all these basement tapes, they made him know the whole story, and you'd have no doubt. But those are the things they won't release or let the public have, and they keep talking about destroying, and I don't know how much has been destroyed now, but if you ever saw those basement tapes and all that stuff, you would have no doubt. Klebold, Mr. Harris is there. I think Mr. Klebold.
Eric and Dillon's motivations have been a subject of ongoing debate. The main factors highlighted include bullying. Both claimed to be victims of bullying. Although subsequent investigations indicate they were not systematically bullied, they did experience social marginalization. Mental health. Eric was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic traits. Dillon suffered from depression and suicidal tendencies. Medication. Eric was taking the antidepressant Luvox. Some studies suggest that certain antidepressants can exacerbate irritability in adolescents, though there is no consensus. Culture of violence. Both were immersed in a culture of violence, consuming violent music, movies, and video games. However, the vast majority of young people who consume such media do not commit murder. Easy access to weapons. They obtained firearms legally, which fueled the debate over gun control in the United States. Media coverage was massive. Helicopters broadcast live footage of the evacuation, and President Bill Clinton interrupted a press conference to address the incident. Attention focused on youth culture, Marilyn Manson's music, video games, and violent movies. Manson responded that his music was not the cause of the violence, but rather a reflection of a culture that was already violent. The case prompted changes in school safety, metal detectors, surveillance cameras, active shooter drills, and the presence of armed police officers in schools. In the decade following the attack, an online subculture known as Columbiners emerged. Young people from around the world were drawn to Eric and Dillon, whom they viewed as martyrs or symbols of rebellion. Many of these young people have been identified as potential copycats. According to a study by The Conversation, nearly half of subsequent school shootings have cited Columbine as a direct or indirect reference. Notable examples of copycat incidents include the 2001 Santana High School shooting. The attacker mentioned Columbine. The 2007 Virginia Tech massacre, Seung Hui Cho referenced the martyrs of Columbine. The 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, the perpetrator idolized Eric and Dillon. The 2018 Santa Fe High School shooting, the shooter wore a black trench coat in honor of Columbine. The aftermath of the attack has had a lasting impact on the survivors. Many have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, and addiction. Several have died from overdoses or suicide in the years that followed. Eric and Dillon's parents expressed their sorrow and faced lawsuits from the victims' families. Law enforcement was criticized for failing to act in time. The school was remodeled, and the library was demolished and rebuilt. On February 9, 2004, Maura Murray, a 21-year-old college student, vanished without a trace following a car accident on a remote rural road in New Hampshire. The entire incident unfolded within a span of roughly 10 minutes, between the moment a neighbor saw her next to her vehicle and the arrival of the police. Maura Murray's disappearance has become one of the most enigmatic cold cases in the United States. For over 2 decades, authorities have investigated without reaching any definitive answers. Theories regarding her whereabouts include a voluntary disappearance, death from exposure to the cold, or foul play. None of these hypotheses have been confirmed. Maura Murray was born on May 4, 1982, in Massachusetts. Her academic record earned her admission to the United States Military Academy at West Point, one of the most prestigious institutions in the United States. However, during her time at West Point, Maura was caught stealing items. primarily makeup, from a campus store. The matter was handled internally. Officially, Mora left the academy on her own accord. Unofficially, it has been noted that she was persuaded to leave to avoid a formal expulsion. After leaving West Point, Mora transferred to the University of Massachusetts, where she began studying nursing. She maintained good grades, had a steady boyfriend, Bill Rausch, who was an Army cadet, and worked 2 jobs. However, in November 2003, she was accused of improperly using a credit card number to order food delivery on at least 3 occasions. The total amount was approximately $80. Mora admitted her mistake, cooperated with university authorities, and accepted a disciplinary agreement. These incidents reveal a duality in Mora's personality. On the one hand, a brilliant and dedicated young woman. On the other, someone who made impulsive decisions under pressure. This trait would prove key to understanding the events leading up to her disappearance. The days leading up to February 9, 2004, show a sequence of warning signs that, in hindsight, indicate Mora was not doing well emotionally. On February 5, 2004, Mora was working her shift at the campus call center. Her supervisor found her crying uncontrollably, unable to compose herself. When asked what was wrong, Mora only kept repeating, "My God, my God." She was escorted back to her dorm room by a coworker, still visibly shaken. On February 7, 2004, Mora's father, Fred Murray, traveled to Amherst to help her buy a new car. They spent the afternoon visiting dealerships and had dinner together. Fred lent her his car so Mora could go out with friends. Everything seemed normal. On February 8, 2004, at 2:30 a.m., Mora was involved in an accident while driving her father's Toyota Corolla. The car crashed into a guardrail in Hadley, Massachusetts. The police report indicates that Mora claimed she lost control while rounding a curve. She was not cited or arrested. Fred picked up his daughter the following day. Mora felt deeply guilty about damaging her father's car. According to Fred, there was no argument, but he noticed that his daughter was deeply distressed. On February 9, 2004, Mora sent an email to her boyfriend Bill, telling him she didn't want to talk at that moment. She then emailed her professors, informing them that she needed to take a week off due to a death in the family. No such death had occurred. It was a lie. Mora organized her room, boxed up her belongings, left several photographs face down, and prepared a to-do list. The scene suggested she planned to return. Around 1 p.m., Mora called a hotel reservation service for Vermont and New Hampshire, but made no reservation. At 2:30 p.m., Mora drove off campus in her old car. Before leaving, she withdrew $280 from an ATM, nearly her entire balance, and bought approximately $40 worth of wine and liquor at a liquor store. Security camera footage shows her alone, unhurried, and seemingly calm. In the car, Mora was carrying clothing, toiletries, nursing textbooks, and maps of Vermont and New Hampshire. No one knew about her plans. She had no friends or family in those states. At 7:27 p.m., on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, Mora's car went off the road and crashed into a snowbank. The area was remote, unlit, and covered in snow. A neighbor, Faith Westman, heard the impact and called the police. Another neighbor, Butch Atwood, a school bus driver, stopped to offer help. Mora was standing next to the car, visibly shaken but uninjured. She told him she had already called roadside assistance, which was strange because there was no cell service in that area.
I just asked her how she was. She said she was shaken up. I couldn't see any blood on her face. And she was shaking like this. I says, okay, I'm going to go.
Butch Atwood was the last person to see Mora alive. The first responder, Officer Cecil Smith, arrived at the scene approximately 10 minutes after the call. Mora was no longer there. The front of the car was damaged, the airbags had deployed, and the engine was off. Inside the car, police found a broken wine bottle in the back seat, empty and sealed alcohol bottles, textbooks, clothing, and toiletries. 3 key items were missing from the vehicle: Mora's cell phone, her credit card, the cash she had withdrawn hours earlier. There was no blood inside or around the vehicle. No footprints were found in the snow either, despite there being approximately 2 feet of accumulated snow. The police treated the case as a possible voluntary disappearance. The vehicle was towed and impounded without a detailed forensic analysis. The area was not cordoned off as a crime scene. The search for Mora began the following day, February 10th. Search dogs, helicopters, and volunteers were mobilized. Tracking dogs followed Mora's scent approximately 100 feet, 30 meters, east of the car, up to a curve in the road. There, the scent vanished without continuing into the woods. The absence of footprints in the snow and the loss of the scent trail fueled the theory that Mora may have gotten into a vehicle at that point, whether voluntarily or by force. Mora's father, Fred Murray, was notified the next day. Upon arriving in New Hampshire, he encountered an investigation riddled with gaps. Police had not treated the location as a potential crime scene. In Mora's dorm room, police found a letter written by her to her boyfriend, Bill. The press speculated it might be a goodbye note, but Fred Murray maintained it was a draft venting about their troubled relationship. The exact contents were never made public. Bill Rausch had a solid alibi. He was in another city and traveled to New Hampshire immediately after learning of the disappearance. However, several of Bill's ex-girlfriends reported abusive behavior, though no evidence directly linking him to Mora's disappearance was ever found. Bill claimed to have received a voicemail from Mora's number days after her disappearance, containing muffled sounds and stifled sobs. Police found no record of that call in phone records. Over the years, 3 main theories have emerged to explain Maura Murray's disappearance. Voluntary disappearance. Maura, under intense emotional pressure, academic trouble, a relationship in crisis, lies to the university, and shoplifting incidents, decided to disappear of her own free will. The trip to New Hampshire, the cash withdrawal, and the packing up of her room are seen as signs of a premeditated plan. However, this theory lacks strong support, because Maura was very close to her family and her boyfriend. There was no subsequent contact, financial activity, or use of identification documents. A voluntary disappearance lasting nearly 2 decades without leaving a trace is considered highly improbable. According to the second theory, Maura, fearing legal consequences for drinking and driving, fled the scene of the accident and headed into the woods. Disoriented by the cold and darkness, she likely succumbed to hypothermia. This version lacks support due to the total absence of footprints in the snow. Searches with tracking dogs yielded no trace. It is virtually impossible to walk through 2 feet, 60 centimeters, of snow without leaving tracks. The third theory is that Maura was approached by a stranger passing by on the road. In the 10-minute window between the accident and the arrival of the police, someone could have picked her up. The tracking dogs lost her scent at a spot on the road, which could indicate that she got into a vehicle. Arguing against this theory is the lack of physical evidence. There are no signs of a struggle, dragging marks, or items left behind. The idea that a criminal happened to pass by at that exact moment and location is statistically unlikely, though not impossible. In 2012, on the 8th anniversary of Maura's disappearance, a YouTube channel called 112 Dirtbag appeared. The name referenced Route 112, the road where Maura vanished, and a derogatory term her father used to refer to the person responsible for her disappearance. The channel posted a video of a man laughing in a macabre and disturbing manner, staring into the camera without saying a word. In the video, the phrase "Happy Anniversary" appeared on screen. The video went viral on mystery and true crime forums, sparking speculation about whether he could be Maura's kidnapper. The FBI investigated, but determined that the creator had no connection to the case, and that the content was a morbid provocation by an attention seeker. The channel was deleted shortly after. Fred Murray stated that the creepy laugh felt like a mockery of the family's suffering, though he did not believe the video's creator was the actual culprit. In 2018, Fred Murray obtained permission to search a property near the accident site, where the basement had been renovated with fresh concrete. 2 independent search dogs alerted to the exact same spot on the floor. Ground-penetrating radar indicated an anomaly beneath the concrete. In April 2019, police excavated the site. They found only pottery and piping. Fred Murray was left devastated, claiming that the excavation had been conducted in the wrong spot. In September 2021, workers found human remains at Loon Mountain, about 25 miles from the accident site. Testing determined that the bones were historical, dating between 1774 and 1942, and had no connection to Maura. In January 2022, the FBI created a national profile for Maura Murray's disappearance, recognizing the case's federal significance. However, no concrete evidence has surfaced. More than 2 decades after Maura Murray's disappearance, the case remains open without a definitive answer. Her body has not been found, nor has anyone responsible been identified. The 3 main theories, voluntary disappearance, death from exposure, and foul play, remain neither confirmed nor ruled out. Each has arguments for and against, and none fully explains the facts. Maura Murray's disappearance is a reminder of how a seemingly simple incident can turn into an unsolved mystery. The combination of a flawed initial investigation, a lack of physical evidence, and the enigmatic nature of the events has turned this case into one of the most fascinating and frustrating in American criminal history. The case remains open. Authorities continue to receive tips, and Maura's family holds on to the hope that answers will one day be found. On January 11th, 2013, Kendrick Johnson, a 17-year-old student, walked into Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, and never walked out. The following day, his body was found inside a rolled-up wrestling mat in the school gym. His shoes were placed neatly on top. His face was unrecognizable. Authorities quickly ruled his death a tragic accident. The official narrative maintained that Kendrick had climbed into the mat to retrieve a shoe, got stuck, and died of asphyxia. But almost immediately, that explanation didn't add up for his peers, his community, and definitely not for his family. The inconsistencies were too glaring to ignore. Kendrick Johnson's case would divide a town, capture national headlines, and expose what many saw as systemic failures in how the justice system handles the deaths of young black men. This is the story of a family that refused to accept silence and demanded answers from a system not designed to provide them. He was 17 years old, a 3-sport athlete who loved basketball, football, and track and field. His friends called him KJ. He dreamed of playing college football, maybe even going pro one day. But on January 11th, 2013, that promise was cut short. It was a Friday morning at Lowndes High School. Students had just returned from winter break. Kendrick's parents had noticed he hadn't come home the night before. They called his friends, his coaches, and even checked hospitals. By morning, panic was starting to set in. Kendrick wasn't the type of person to just vanish. At school, classes went on as normal. In the old gym, used primarily for storage, several students were playing basketball before class. One of them noticed something strange, a pair of white and orange sneakers sticking out from the top of an upright, rolled-up wrestling mat. At first, they thought it was a prank. Maybe someone had hidden their shoes. But when they took a closer look, they saw what appeared to be blood near the edge of the mat. Then came the smell. They called a teacher, then school administrators, and finally the police. Inside the mat, upside down, was the body of Kendrick Johnson. He was wedged face down, with his arms pinned to his sides. His face and chest were swollen. Blood had pooled at the bottom of the mat, soaking the floor underneath. Lowndes County Sheriff's deputies quickly secured the gym. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation was called in. An initial theory emerged rapidly. Investigators suggested that Kendrick may have climbed into the mat to reach a shoe, slipped, became trapped, and died of asphyxia. But even in those early hours, people were asking questions. The mats were heavy and tightly rolled. If Kendrick had been reaching for a shoe, why were his shoes placed neatly on top of the mat? Students said the mats were stored upright, standing 6 feet tall. Kendrick was approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall. He could have easily tipped the mat over, so why climb inside? The school went into lockdown. The Johnson family received the call that no parent should ever receive. When they arrived, they weren't even allowed to see their son's body. In less than 24 hours, the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office announced that there were no signs of foul play. No fight, no weapon. They suggested that Kendrick had died from accidental positional asphyxiation. But to Kendrick's family, the explanation made no sense. They knew their son. He wasn't reckless, and he certainly wouldn't have climbed into a rolled-up mat to grab a shoe. The official narrative was that students often stored their shoes or personal items inside the upright mats to avoid paying locker fees, but classmates disputed this. Some said they had never seen Kendrick do that. Others said the mats were rolled so tightly that only an arm could fit through the opening. The physical details also raised questions. Kendrick's body had severe bruising on his face. His eyes were swollen. Blood had pooled at the bottom of the mat. However, investigators claimed there was no evidence of a fight. A pair of black and white sneakers, not the orange ones Kendrick was supposedly reaching for, was found a few feet away, stained with what appeared to be blood. Another pair of shoes, believed to belong to Kendrick, was placed neatly on top of the mat. No one could explain why. When security camera footage from the school gym was released, it raised more questions than answers. The footage showed Kendrick walking into the gym. Then, nothing. Dozens of frames appeared to be corrupted. Timestamps skipped. Key angles were blurry or blacked out. School officials claimed that the missing footage was due to different cameras recording at slightly different speeds, but the inconsistencies were impossible to ignore. How was it possible for a modern high school to have cameras fail at the exact moment leading up to a student's death? Why was Kendrick seen entering, but never leaving? And why did it take weeks for his family to even gain access to the footage? There was also uncollected evidence. Blood spatter was found on a nearby wall. A bloody pink and white tissue was found on the floor. Neither of these samples was tested. The gym was not treated as a potential crime scene. Students were allowed to enter and exit the gym freely for nearly 2 days after Kendrick's death. When the Johnson family received Kendrick's body from the funeral home, they were shocked by what they saw. The damage to his face did not look like asphyxiation. It looked like trauma. The family wanted answers that the official autopsy had not provided, so they hired an independent pathologist, Dr. William Anderson, to perform a second autopsy. According to the private autopsy, Kendrick's death was not an accident. Dr. Anderson concluded that Kendrick died from blunt force trauma to the right side of his neck, consistent with being struck by an object or another person, rather than from becoming trapped in a mat. But there was something else, something even more disturbing. When Dr. Anderson opened Kendrick's body, his internal organs were missing. In their place, newspapers had been stuffed to fill the cavity. The Johnson family was horrified. They demanded answers from both the funeral home and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI. The GBI claimed it had returned Kendrick's organs after the state autopsy. The funeral home denied responsibility, saying it received the body that way. To this day, no one has been able to explain what truly happened to Kendrick's organs. When the news broke, the story spread across national media. What was once deemed an unfortunate accident had turned into a full-blown controversy. CNN, NBC, and dozens of local outlets descended on Valdosta. The Johnson family spoke out publicly, demanded federal involvement, and called the case what they believed it to be: a cover-up. The family filed a federal lawsuit against the GBI and the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office. They marched through the streets of Valdosta, holding signs with Kendrick's face. They gave interviews and confronted officials who dismissed their pleas as a conspiracy. Statement from Jacqueline Johnson: "You can't tell me my son died reaching for a shoe. They beat my son, stuffed him into that mat, and think we're just going to move on. We won't." An audio recording also surfaced. A young man's voice could be heard saying, "They're going to catch me anyway. I never should have done this. I was young and stupid. Kendrick didn't deserve this, man." The Johnson family said the audio was secretly recorded by a relative of the speaker and sold to them for $1,000. The person in the recording was never officially identified. In 2013, the United States Department of Justice, DOJ, opened its own review of the case. For the Johnson family, it was a moment of hope. But even with the federal government involved, questions only deepened. Why did key witnesses give contradictory statements? Why were so many pieces of evidence, from the blood-stained shoes to the tissues, never tested? The DOJ spent nearly 3 years reviewing thousands of pages of reports, interviews, and forensic evidence. In 2016, they announced that they would not file federal charges, citing insufficient evidence to prove foul play or a cover-up. For the Johnson family, it was a devastating blow. Years of fighting, public pressure, and reliving their son's death over and over again, and still no one was held accountable. More than 10 years have passed since Kendrick Johnson's body was found in that school gym, and yet the questions have not gone away. In the years since his death, his name has become a rallying cry, not just in Georgia, but across the nation. Artists, activists, and public figures have spoken his name at protests, rallies, and online. The hashtag #JusticeForKJ became a digital memorial, a place where people demanded answers long after the headlines faded. In the court of public opinion, Kendrick Johnson's case represents something much broader. It is what happens when a black family's grief collides with a system built on disregard. It is how the words "no foul play" can sound like a verdict before an investigation even begins. The Johnson family has spent more than a decade fighting a system that seems determined to outlast them. Their struggle became about something more than their son. It became about every family ever told to accept an answer that makes no sense. Every black parent who ever felt the system didn't view their child as worthy of the truth. For Valdosta, the case remains a scar. Some residents say it divided the town. Others say it exposed what was already there, a deep tension between truth, power, and race in the American Deep South.